Hi guys. Brian and Lily met through mutual friends at a summer gathering, and their connection was immediate. She was lively, with a magnetic smile, and he, quiet but attentive, found himself drawn to her confidence. It didn't take long for them to fall into a romantic relationship. A year later, after a whirlwind romance full of weekend getaways, late-night conversations, and shared dreams, Brian proposed to Lily under the stars on their favorite hiking trail. She said yes without hesitation. Their wedding was small but beautiful, with close friends and family, a reflection of their intimate connection. The first few months were filled with excitement as they settled into married life. They moved into a cozy apartment in a quiet part of town, and both enjoyed the peacefulness it offered after their hectic workdays. There were little things, morning coffee together, spontaneous dinners, walks after work, that made everything feel right. However, as time passed, small tensions began to creep in. At first, it was just occasional disagreements over trivial matters, but soon it became clear that something deeper was at play. Brian, who had always been dedicated to his job, started working longer hours, leaving Lily feeling lonely and disconnected. Lily, on the other hand, had recently taken on more responsibilities at work, leading her to be more stressed and less patient. They began to clash over household responsibilities, social gatherings, and even the way they communicated. What once had been playful banter turned into biting remarks. As their arguments grew more frequent, both of them began to retreat into their own worlds, avoiding difficult conversations. Lily started spending more time out with friends, and Brian spent longer hours at work or buried in his hobbies. The distance between them widened, and the warmth that once defined their relationship slowly faded. Though they still loved each other in some way, their connection was strained, and neither knew how to break the growing silence. They had reached a point where the happiness they once shared seemed like a distant memory. The cracks in our marriage started to widen slowly, then all at once. It was as though the warmth we'd once shared evaporated overnight, and neither of us knew how to bring it back. Lily began accusing me of being indifferent, of not caring enough about her or our relationship. I remember the first time she said it clearly, her voice trembling with frustration, her eyes holding something cold, something distant. "You don't care about me anymore," she'd said, her words sharp and cutting. At first, I tried to brush it off. I thought it was just another one of those moments where emotions ran high and things got blown out of proportion. I wasn't perfect, I knew that. But I didn't think I was the one causing this rift. I worked hard every day, came home tired but always willing to listen, to try, to keep us from falling apart. But Lily's accusations kept coming, and the weight of them grew heavier each time. The arguments became more frequent, louder. Small things, who was going to take care of dinner, why I had stayed at work late again, why I hadn't noticed she'd changed her hair, escalated into things we couldn't even understand anymore. It wasn't just the surface-level issues, it was the silent accusations of betrayal, of neglect, of being unable to recognize the person standing right in front of me. Every fight felt like a reminder that I was losing her, and nothing I said or did seemed to help. Lily was no longer the same woman I had fallen in love with. The playful energy she once had, the spark in her eyes, it all seemed to be gone. She became distant, retreating into herself, locking away the person I used to know. It was like I was living with a stranger, someone who no longer wanted to be with me. I could feel it in the air between us, this ever-growing tension that sat like an invisible wall. I tried everything I could think of to fix things. I took a day off from work, told her I wanted to talk, but she didn't want to. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, turning her face away from me, her voice flat. That's when it hit me. The realization that the woman I had married was no longer here. I didn't know if it was her work stress, if it was my own failures as a husband, or if it was something deeper, something neither of us was brave enough to confront. The truth was, I felt isolated in my own home. I would sit in the living room, trying to read or watch TV, but every glance at her was met with a wall of coldness. Her eyes, once warm and filled with life, were now distant, barely meeting mine. I missed her. I missed the laughter, the intimacy, the way she used to look at me like I was the center of her world. Now, everything felt like a transaction. Small exchanges about bills, errands, responsibilities, No more late-night talks or inside jokes. I couldn't even remember the last time she'd kissed me without it feeling forced, like a formality. I tried talking to her, asking if something was wrong, if she was unhappy. But the answers she gave were always vague. "I'm fine," she'd say, or "I'm just tired." It wasn't like her to hide things. Lily had always been open about what bothered her, but now there was a wall between us, a silence that spoke louder than any argument ever could. I started staying late at work not because I wanted to avoid her, but because I didn't know what else to do. At least when I was at work, I could focus on something concrete, something that didn't involve the gnawing feeling of failure that seemed to haunt me whenever I walked through the door. But it wasn't long before she began to accuse me of using work as an excuse, of prioritizing everything but her. Each late night became another reason for her to tell me that I didn't care, that I was just running away from the problem instead of facing it. We'd both lost something in this marriage. The love, the laughter, the connection. We had lost it piece by piece until all we were left with was a room full of unspoken words. But I didn't know how to fix it. I wanted to fix it more than anything. I wanted to find the man I once was, the one who could make her smile, the one who could sweep her off her feet. But the more I tried, the more I felt like I was pushing her further away. In the quiet moments, when we weren't arguing, I'd look at her and wonder what had happened. What had changed between us? She still looked beautiful, still had that gentle curve to her smile when she wasn't angry, but something in her had hardened. I couldn't tell if it was just the stress of life catching up to her or if it was something deeper, something inside her that was shifting. Maybe I was part of it. Maybe I was the reason she had become this way, distant and cold. One night, as I lay beside her in bed, the silence stretching out between us, I realized that I didn't even know how to talk to her anymore. We had so many unspoken things, so many broken pieces, and I didn't know where to start. I could feel the weight of the loneliness pressing down on me. I didn't want to give up, but I didn't know how to fight for something that seemed so far gone. She had already made up her mind, I thought, and I didn't know if there was any way back. It was like we were both holding on to the idea of what we had, but not the reality of what was left. I kept telling myself it would get better, that we could fix this. But each day, the gap between us grew wider. I couldn't reach her anymore, no matter how hard I tried. And soon I realized, maybe I wasn't the only one feeling isolated. Maybe, just maybe, she was too. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, a girls' trip she had been planning for months. Lily had been talking about it for weeks before she left, saying she needed a break, some time to herself to recharge. At first, I didn't think much of it. She deserved it, after all. Her job had been stressful lately, and I knew she hadn't had a proper vacation in a long time. I didn't even hesitate when she mentioned it. "Go, enjoy yourself," I said. "You've earned it." But as soon as she left, something shifted. I'm not sure when exactly, but I started to notice the signs. She stopped responding to my messages as quickly as she had before. At first, I assumed she was just busy, exploring the cities, catching up with her friends. I understood that. But then the delays grew longer. I'd send her a text, asking how she was, or telling her I missed her. Hours would pass, sometimes a full day before I'd hear back, and even then her responses felt distant, short, almost dismissive. "I'm fine," she'd say. "Having fun, no need to worry." The tone was off, and the more she did it, the more unsettled I became. The doubts began to grow in the back of my mind. I tried to push them down, to tell myself I was just being paranoid. She was on vacation after all. She didn't owe me constant updates. But then, one night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to call her, hoping to hear her voice, hoping for some kind of reassurance that everything was still okay. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again the next morning. No answer. I sent her another message. "I miss you. Hope you're doing well. Call me when you can." She didn't reply. That's when I started to feel the sting of something more. Something deeper. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being shut out. Something about it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't like Lily to act like this. Even when we were at odds, even when we fought, she still made time to check in, to respond, to give me some sense of connection. But now, nothing. Not even a hint of the woman I used to know. Days passed. I tried not to dwell on it, but I couldn't stop myself. Her absence felt louder with every hour that went by, and the silence between us began to weigh heavily on my chest. Then came the video. I hadn't been snooping. I wasn't the type to go through her things, to invade her privacy. But that night, after another unanswered message, I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through social media when I saw it, an unfamiliar name in my feed. A video posted by one of Lily's friends. It was from her trip. The caption was something innocuous, "Cheers to unforgettable memories in Europe," but it was the video that caught my eye. It was blurry at first, the quality not great, but there was no mistaking it once I zoomed in. Lily was laughing, standing on a cobblestone street in what looked like a quaint European square. She was holding a glass of wine in one hand, her other arm draped over the shoulder of a man I didn't recognize. They were close, too close. He had his arm around her waist, his face inches from hers. They were laughing, but the look in her eyes, it was different. It wasn't the usual carefree smile I was used to seeing when she was around her friends. It was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. I kept watching. In the background, I saw another man, tall, dark-haired, with a rough look about him. He seemed to be part of the group, and he was looking directly at Lily as she laughed with the first man. It felt wrong. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the way they were standing so close, the intimacy that seemed to pulse between them, or maybe it was the way the video seemed to linger on them, the way the camera caught Lily's smile just a moment too long. I watched it again. And again. Each time, the knot in my stomach tightened. I wanted to believe it was nothing, just a harmless moment, a silly vacation video with her friends. But the more I saw it, the more unsettled I became. There was something about the way the two men interacted with her, the way she responded, that didn't sit right. I had spent enough time with her, enough time as her husband, to know when something was off. I felt a surge of anger rise in me. Why wasn't she telling me about these men? Why hadn't she mentioned them at all in her messages? If it was innocent, why was she hiding it? I wasn't stupid. The truth was starting to become clear, even if I didn't want to accept it. She wasn't just ignoring me. She was actively shutting me out, keeping me at a distance. And now this video, this evidence, that suggested she was getting too comfortable with other men. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she was with them or the fact that she wasn't even trying to explain it to me. I wanted to call her, to confront her, to ask her what the hell was going on. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, staring at my phone screen, feeling a combination of rage and sorrow building inside me. I thought about the times we'd shared, the promises we made to each other. I thought about how it used to be before all this, before the silence, the distance, the coldness. And now, here I was, watching her smile with someone else, wondering if I'd ever get her back. The video haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with those men. I couldn't shake it. The doubts, the fears, they dug into me deeper and deeper. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying the reality that was staring me in the face. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with, had gone halfway across the world and found comfort in the arms of strangers. I tried calling her again that night, but it went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice thick with emotion, barely holding it together. "Lily," I said, my voice shaky, "I saw the video. Why are you ignoring me? What's going on over there?" She didn't respond for hours. And when she finally did, it was with the same distant tone. "I'm having a good time," she texted. "Don't worry about me." But I couldn't stop worrying. I knew something had changed. I wasn't sure when it happened, or how, but I knew that the woman I married was slipping away. And no matter how hard I tried, I didn't know if I could get her back. Lily returned from her trip a few days later, and when she walked through the door, something about her was different. She seemed changed. It wasn't just the way she looked. There was a new calmness about her, an air of quiet confidence. But there was also something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact or the way she kept her distance, even when we were in the same room. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of her presence like an absence. And it wasn't long before she dropped the bombshell. We were sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee in an uncomfortable silence, when she finally spoke. I'm pregnant. It took me a moment to process her words. My mind went blank for a second, and I had to blink to make sure I had heard her right. Pregnant? How could that be possible? I had been with her every step of the way, and we had been trying for a while to have a child, but this wasn't how I imagined it happening. My heart began to race, and I felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over me: shock, excitement, but also something darker, something I couldn't explain. I should have been happy. We'd been talking about starting a family for a while now, and Lily had been more than ready to take the next step. But something in me, something deep down, refused to let the news sink in. I couldn't just celebrate without questions, not after everything that had happened. The silence, the distance, the video. It was hard to admit it, but I had my doubts. As much as I wanted to believe her, the timing felt off. And the way she said it, as if it were a casual announcement, made me uneasy. There was no hesitation in her voice, no moment of doubt. She wasn't nervous, wasn't afraid of how I might react. It felt too rehearsed. The night she returned from her trip, I had scrolled through the video again, replaying it over and over in my head. The way she laughed with those men, the way they were so comfortable around her. I knew it sounded paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. What if she had been with one of them? What if this wasn't my child? I didn't say anything right away. I tried to let the idea of the pregnancy sink in, tried to push aside my suspicions. But they kept creeping back in. I thought about the way she had been so distant since she came back, the way she'd kept her phone out of sight, the way she never gave me a straight answer when I asked her about the men in her trip. Every time I brought it up, she would brush it off or change the subject, saying it was nothing. But nothing ever felt like nothing. I couldn't ignore the questions piling up in my mind. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. We were sitting at the breakfast table, both of us on edge, and I finally asked the question I had been dreading. I want a DNA test. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unforgiving. I could see her eyes widen in surprise, and for the first time since she had returned, I saw a flicker of emotion, hurt, maybe even anger. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders tensed. "Brian, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice sharp, though there was an edge of vulnerability in it. I don't know if I can believe this, Lily. After everything, after how you've been acting, I can't just take this at face value. I need to know that this child is mine." The words came out more harshly than I meant, but there was no turning back. I needed to hear her answer, to see how she would react. Part of me wanted her to tell me I was being ridiculous, to reassure me with her usual warmth. But instead, she stared at me, her face pale, her eyes cold. "You think I would lie to you?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but the accusation was still there. I didn't know how to answer that. The thought of her lying to me, of her deceiving me in such a huge way, felt unbearable. But the doubt was there, gnawing at me, impossible to ignore. I had seen the way she had acted since returning. The way she kept pulling away from me. I had no answers, no explanation for the distance between us, and this pregnancy, this child, only made the cracks in our relationship more evident. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need to know, Lily. I can't move forward without the truth. I need to be sure." She didn't respond immediately. For a long time, she just sat there, her hands clenched tightly around her coffee mug, staring down at the table. I could see the emotions swirling inside her. Hurt, frustration, maybe even betrayal. She had to know why I was asking this. After everything that had happened, after the way she'd been acting, it was impossible for me to trust everything at face value. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes wet with unshed tears, and I saw something break in her expression. "I can't believe you're doing this, Brian," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought we were past this. I thought we were stronger than this." I wanted to take it back, to hold her, to apologize for making her feel like this. But I couldn't. The doubts had taken root, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, they were there. I had to know the truth, even if it meant losing her in the process. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice softer now. "I just need to know." She stood up suddenly, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. "Fine," she snapped, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'll get the damn test. But don't expect me to forgive you for this." She stormed out of the room, and I sat there in silence, the weight of my decisions settling over me. I knew that asking for a DNA test would change everything. It would break something between us, something fragile that I wasn't sure could be repaired. But I also knew I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Whatever it was, I had to face it. And I had to know if this child was truly mine. As much as I wanted to trust her, as much as I wanted to believe that we could move past everything, the doubts kept clawing at me. I couldn't help it. I couldn't just pretend that everything was fine. Not anymore. The days leading up to the DNA test felt like an eternity. Each moment, each passing hour, only deepened the knot in my stomach. I couldn't escape the thought of what might be waiting for me on the other side of those results. I had asked for it, demanded it, but deep down I wasn't sure I was prepared for the truth. Still, I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt. I needed to know. Lily had gone silent since our confrontation. She didn't speak to me much after that. The house felt like a shell, empty, hollow, the walls closing in around us. Even the air seemed to have changed. I could feel the distance between us, as palpable as any physical barrier. She spent most of her time out of the house, or locked away in the bedroom when she was home. I don't think either of us was really sure how to act, what to say, now that the truth was looming so close. When the test results finally arrived, my hands shook as I opened the envelope. The paper inside was simple, clinical, sterile, and I tried to hold my breath as I read the words. It was like the world froze for a second, the words burning themselves into my brain as I processed them. The test confirmed it. I wasn't the father. It wasn't some cruel twist of fate. It wasn't a mistake. It was simple, undeniable truth. The child Lily was carrying, my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, wasn't mine. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the shock of seeing the test results staring back at me, or the realization that I had been deceived, that everything I thought I knew had been a lie. I couldn't think straight. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating in a sea of disbelief and betrayal. I didn't even feel angry at first, just numb. It was as if the world around me had shattered, and I was standing in the wreckage, unable to piece it together again. Lily came home later that evening. She walked into the house with her usual quiet step, but I knew something had changed. She had to know I had the results. She hadn't said a word since I told her I wanted the test, but I could see it in her eyes. She was waiting, bracing herself for what I would say. I stood there, the test results in my hand, staring at her. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest heavy with everything I wanted to say but couldn't. Finally, I found my voice, though it came out cold and detached, like I was talking to a stranger. "It's not mine, Lily." Her face went pale, and she looked like she might crumble right in front of me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. She just stood there, trembling, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, she looked vulnerable, so small, so fragile. But that didn't change anything. "I know," she whispered after a long pause. The admission was barely audible, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. "I know. I never meant for it to get this far." I didn't know what to say after that. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, trying to make sense of what she had just confessed. So it had been true. She had cheated. She had been with someone else, and now I was paying the price for her lies. The trust we had built, the years of our marriage, had all been built on sand. "You don't get to say that to me," I finally spat, my anger rising to the surface, pushing out the numbness. "You don't get to say anything after what you've done. You've broken everything, Lily. Everything." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't. She had taken something from me, something that I would never get back. And now she stood there, trying to justify it, trying to explain it away, but I wasn't listening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I thought I could fix it before it got this far." The more she talked, the angrier I became. The excuses, the apologies, they didn't matter. Nothing she said could change what had happened. I had been deceived, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, and she had thrown it all away. I want a divorce, I said, my voice steady and final. The words tasted like acid in my mouth, but they were the truth. It was over. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living a lie. She had already made her choice, and now I had to make mine. She looked at me, her face crumpling with hurt and shame. Please, Brian, she pleaded. Please don't do this. We can fix it. We can work through it. I love you. But her words meant nothing to me now. I had already seen the truth about her, about us. There was no going back. She had crossed a line that I could never come back from. And even though part of me wanted to take her in my arms, to forgive her, to believe in the person I once thought she was, I knew that I couldn't. I couldn't forgive her for this betrayal. I couldn't live with the lies anymore. The next few weeks were a blur. The divorce process was painful, but necessary. I filed the papers and she didn't fight it. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe deep down she knew it was the only way forward. The papers were served, the arrangements were made, and we began the process of separating our lives. What followed was a strange mixture of anger and relief. I moved out of the house, though I never really felt at home there anymore. Everything felt tainted, everything felt broken. The pain of losing Lily was one thing, but the shame, the embarrassment of being betrayed by my own wife, was something else entirely. As the divorce proceeded, I also filed a defamation lawsuit against Lily. It wasn't something I had planned to do at first, but as the story of our breakup started to spread, rumors began to swirl. People started to whisper about why we were splitting, and it didn't take long for the false narratives to take hold. Some people speculated about my supposed failings as a husband, others painted Lily as a victim in all of this. It wasn't right. I wasn't going to let her ruin my reputation, too. The lawsuit was messy, but in the end, I won. The court sided with me, and the defamation claims were dismissed. It didn't erase the pain or the loss, but it helped me regain some control over the narrative. I had to fight for my name, for my dignity, for my future. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself. I leaned on friends, therapy, anything that could help me move forward. The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The man I had been before the divorce, before the betrayal, was gone. But I wasn't ready to give up. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I would rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece, I would start again. But as for Lily, I didn't know what happened to her after the divorce was final. I don't think I ever will. We parted ways, and it was as if we both vanished from each other's lives. Maybe that was for the best. We had been strangers to each other for a long time, and in the end, I was just another part of her past. I wish I could say that I was angry, that I wanted revenge, that I wanted to make her suffer for what she did. But that wasn't me. It never had been. What I wanted was closure. I wanted to find peace, to rebuild my life without the shadow of her lies hanging over me. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to forgive myself for ever trusting her in the first place. Goodbye.